Welcome to Real Life with Jenny. My name's Jenny Senapataratna. Grab your favorite drink, get a snack, and we'll get started. Today I have Lady Grey tea, of course, with some half and half of sugar, because that's the only way to enjoy it, in my personal opinion. And I have a plum. I just love plums in plum season. So let's get real. Have you ever had one of those moments that you just cannot even believe how big of a mistake you made, right? Well, I'm going to share one of those moments with you, which is very humbling. I have to be completely honest with you. And it's hard to have a podcast quite often that's called Real Life because I really feel like I need to be authentic with you. I made a huge mistake. I wish I could underline huge and you could see that in big, flashing letters. Huge mistake. So I don't even know how to start to tell you this because it's so crazy and you're going to be like, Jenny, what in the world? Well, my husband brought me in the room a couple weeks ago, I think. At this point, I'm not even sure. It's all a blur. And he said, hey, Jenny, I think you're paying for Constant Contact on this credit card. And I was like, okay, that's fine. We have Constant Contact for Christ Connection, not a big deal. And he was like, no, that's what I thought. I thought that that's what we were doing too and getting reimbursed that money every month. But I just realized because I went to go change it because we no longer use that credit card. He's like, I was just going to change it to get more miles on our other card. So he was going to change it out and realized it wasn't Christ Connection's Constant Contact. I know you're like, well, what's that big of a deal? Well, actually, 8 years ago, yes, I just said 8 years ago, we at my old job got rid of Constant Contact and changed over to a new system. And my card was the one paying for it, and I was getting reimbursed every month from the school. And I remember calling them and saying, let's cancel. And they said, okay, we're going to give you a couple months to make sure everything's done, and then we'll cancel it. And I obviously never called and checked up to make sure it had been canceled. Yep, there I am. 100% me, because we used to pay by the year. And so I guess I figured we'd pay by the year and just never went back and checked. And yeah, I've been paying for a service at a job I no longer have for the last 8 years. Now talk about huge mistake, right? I just stood there like, how is this even possible? I am normally very responsible, and we actually went through all of our other things to make sure that there was nothing else coming out that we didn't know about in any other part of I opened a Kohl's card back in 1995. Is that still it was just, you do some deep diving when you realize that you've made this kind of mistake. And I was honestly humiliated. As you can imagine, and horrified. So I actually called the company and I was like, hey, is this actually a different, can you tell me about this account? And he was like, well, what's your name and what's it associated with? And I told him I no longer work there. And he was like, well, it hasn't been used for many, many years. He told me it was 8 years. I think that's what he said, 7 or 8 years it hadn't been used. And so he's like, you're the only name on the account, so you can close it out. And I was like, okay, well, I'm no longer there. And he was like, that's not a problem because it has been inactive for so long. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? He's like, do you work at a different company? And I'm like, well, I work for my husband at our ministry. And he's like, do you guys use Constant Contact? And I'm like, yes, that's how come we were confused, because we were getting reimbursed for this. Anyway. And he was like, well, I will just roll that money on over to your new company. And I have to tell you, I was stunned because it was my fault. It was 100% me that I did not follow up and did not expect anything. And he refunded a pretty nice chunk of money and gave it to Christ Connection as we don't have to pay next year because we pay by the year at Christ Connection. And so I was just blown away. I was just like, wow, that was so sweet. And so he canceled everything and sent me a confirmation. And of course, I'm going to check up again next month to make sure. that it's not being charged again. Fool me once, right? That's kind of where we are. And I just felt so overwhelmed. Like we are super responsible with our money. We work really hard and every penny counts. Like I'm one of those people that picks up pennies on the side of the road. Like if you haven't listened to this podcast and know that I'm one of the stingiest people with money that there are in the world, like you maybe you need to go back and re-listen. I mean, so it was just one of those like extremely humbling moments that I had made a huge mistake. And I didn't recoup all the money. Like it just wasn't possible because it was 8 years of money. But he did give us a decent chunk. And Kevin just looked at me and he was like, it's okay. And I was like, oh, wow. Like Kevin's forgiveness was like just automatic. And there was no blaming and there was no yelling. And there was honestly not even a lot of tears on my end. And he said something to me that was super interesting. We live in a trailer court and we own our home, but you have to rent the land. And a couple of years ago, the family that owned our trailer court sold it to a corporation. And the corporation owns a ton of trailer courts in the United States. And they're not a corporation that I know very well, except for that they like to raise the rent. That's one of the things they like to do. And so they have actually raised our rent every year that they've owned it. And this year was a sticker shock for me. I was a little like, I mean, it's not a ton of money, but it is enough that you were like, oh, okay, well, it was $60. I'll just tell you because I'm being real here. Maybe Kevin's going to be like, take that off the air. Then it was a $60 bump in our rent. And I realized that that's not a lot of money. But you also we're trying to be responsible with our money and make sure that it stretches where it needs to stretch. And you're like, okay, what are we going to get rid of to make sure that we are still in a good place? Like I was like, could we get rid of Netflix and just have that every 3 months? Because like really you don't need to watch it every day, so you get rid of that. And then we're like, well, no, because Sam's watching some show on there, so we don't really, like it was like a whole Jenny was worrying about things, right? I actually have known about the rent increase since about June or July, I believe, and have been worried about it and carrying it for that long. And I'll be honest with you, I've never brought it to the Lord. I've never been like, Lord, how are you going to handle this? This is you, we trust you and we trust that you're going to do this. I have been like, well, what if I speak a couple extra times a year? And if I sell some wreaths, maybe that would make up enough money to help with that. Maybe not all of it, but enough if I did that. And then I maybe sold some other things that we really don't need in the house and maybe take up dog walking. I don't know. And then I'd put it down and I'd go, okay, I'm not going to worry about this now. And then I'd pick it back up and I never brought it to the Lord. I never went before him and said, Lord, we've got this issue. Help me. Because I was like, it's too small. It's such a small amount of money. And most people would just laugh at that kind of increase in their lives. And I just was like, okay. And Kevin looked at me that day and he's like, look at that. It's $45 towards our rent increase. Yeah, I'm still stunned when he said that to me. And I was like, oh, wow, that's true. Because we're no longer going to pay it. And now we have that money to pay towards the rent increase. And here's Jenny struggling and worrying and, trying to figure it out all on her own because that's what I sometimes do. And I'm here to be honest with you because we all do it. We are all struggling with something and we're not bringing it to God. And we are holding it and we're saying it's too small or it's too big or I want to fix this myself, whether you'd say that aloud or not. And God's like, hey guys, I actually have a plan for this. Like there's $45 flowing out of your account every month that you have not accounted for that I have. That I've already said, hey, I've already got most of this raise covered. You just have to wait for that. And I think it's so important that wherever you are right now, that you just take a moment. And I know that I don't normally try to get deep and stuff, but I really feel like there's some of you out there struggling with some pretty big things that you're like, Lord, I don't see your hand in this. I do not see that any of this is for your good. I do not see any kind of positivity at all. And here's Jenny like whining about $60 a month. And come on, that's not even worth my time, because there's so much going on in your life. And I want you to know that God's got a solution and he has a plan, and that he loves you even though you can't see it. And that you are not aware of what's happening underneath the surface, but he is. And when you get to that point that he reveals it, it is going to be such a great day. I went from a day of feeling humiliated and embarrassed to, wow, God supplies my needs according to his riches and glory. And he knew that day that I would need the reminder that he was ultimately in charge. And yes, I screw up. And yes, I make mistakes. And yes, I am far from perfect. But his plan is perfect. And his love for me is perfect. And I just want to encourage you with that. No matter what you're walking through, big or small, that you know that God is standing alongside of you. And when he reveals what he's doing, it's going to be a great day. Just hold on and don't make my mistake. Don't make the mistake of holding back and not going, Lord, can you help me with this? Because if I would have said, Lord, I need your help with this, he would have said, okay, Jenny, I've got it. And I would have had peace for a couple months that I have not had peace. I have been living in chaos because I didn't bring it to the Lord. And I want you to live in peace. You may not see the ultimate solution right away, but God can grant peace in the midst of your chaos. And that's what I'm praying for you right now. For all of those this fall that are going through chaos, big or small, that God will bring peace because you've brought your worry to the Lord. Well, that's all I have for you this week. I just am excited about the peace that God can bring to your life as you bring those worries and those concerns, big and small. Even the small ones, guys, because I'm learning the hard way. And that God will have a plan that will blow you away. Because I will honestly tell you, if you would have told me that this was happening, I would have been like, that's not possible. I was so responsible. And here we are, right? And now God is supplying that $45 in a very different way. Well, you can find me at Real Life with Jenny on Instagram, Facebook, and Be Real. You can also find me at ChristConnection.cc. I am scheduling for 2024 and I have a couple slots for Christmas. If you're having a women's Christmas tea, let me know. I'd love to come out. But I just know that hopefully my being very honest and telling you my biggest mistake that I've made in the last 8 years, will help you know that no matter what you do, God still loves you. And no matter what kind of mistakes you have, that God has got a plan and a purpose for your life that is beyond what you can even see. Well, you all have a great week.